Hey everybody, Ragnarok here, back with my second game out of 6 from the US Amateur East tournament, which I just participated in a few weeks ago. And this game is also going to be the Yugoslav attack for me as white. It's going to be the last one that I do of the Dragon versus the Yugoslav in a while, just because I feel like I've hammered in the idea of the opening for how to play it as white, kind of what the goals are, and how to play it against it as black. So definitely check out those other videos if you haven't already. In the next few videos, we're also going to be looking at a different opening. So if you're unsure what to play as black against d4, the queen's pawn opening, we're going to go into the king's Indian, which is going to be knight to f6. So more on that next Monday. But for this game, I was playing as white. I think my opponent was every opponent was really good, but I think his rating was like 1200 something. But he certainly didn't really play like at 1200. I don't think I really had an easy match in this tournament. So you'll see he was playing as black and he played the dragon. So e4 here, c5, starting just the Sicilian, knight f3, d6, standard because it helps block the e5 pawn movement. So black can safely bring his knight out to f6. I go with the open Sicilian, d4, c takes d4, and then knight takes back. And again, there are variations where the queen can take back here. It's perfectly playable for white, but I prefer to take with the knight because I like the centralized knight. And it's tough to kick away. I mean, if you play e5, you're kind of committing to the knight-orf, which is a6. And then my knight comes over here, which is nice. When my other knight's here, they attack all 4 of these squares. And I think that's a pretty good place to be. So knight comes out to c6, f6, knight comes out to c3. And then the dragon, and I thought about this afterwards. It's kind of out of order. The proper move here to start the Yugoslav attack is bishop e3 right away. I guess I was kind of concerned that, I'll just play it out, he would come here to g4, but after analyzing it, this is actually a blunder for black. So the answer here, if somebody does do this against you, kind of like you're thinking, oh, I have to move my bishop again, I really like where it is, maybe I move it back, but the actual answer is to go bishop b5 check, because if he comes straight in here, you could take back the knight, and if he takes back for even material, you now have an attack with check on the rook, and you go up a piece. Don't worry about him taking now, because being up a rook, it's not a big deal. It's going to be a different game. It's going to be much more easy for you to win as white. So if he doesn't block there, let's just say he blocks with the knight, well then you can now take this knight, which is hanging here. And same thing, if he blocks with the queen, you're going to take the queen, and if he blocks with the bishop, his king can't move, by the way, so he has to block with something, then you can just go ahead and take right here. The bishop is now pinned, cannot take the queen because the knight bishop is attacking the king. So I realized that after the game, in the middle of the game, I was just worried about him coming there. Who knows? But it's just the same thing, just out of order. So when he brings his bishop up, I come to bishop e3. My next move is probably going to be f3 anyway, just to defend this pawn. So he castles. I bring my bishop out to c4, which is, again, the line that you want to be on. You want to be on and attack the f7 square for black, right here. And it just kind of limits what this pawn can do later in the game. And if he starts to try to attack it with anything, maybe queen here, you can just safely bring it back, and you're protecting these squares. Because, again, my goal is to castle on the queen side. So knight comes out, which is normal. If he wants to take this, fine, I'll take this back with bishop. Most people don't, though. Bring your queen up. Now you have both pieces on the h6 diagonal, which is very strong. Now rook comes here. This is a little bit different than the other variations we've seen. And the reason for this is because eventually, let's just say I castle and the queen comes out here. Just for the sake of argument, let's say my king is on this square, so he can't take with check. Actually, just to show you exactly what it is, let's make a couple bad moves. Okay, so in this scenario, you would actually want to come here. If this rook weren't here, queen could take you. You would actually take here with check, which is why he did that rook move in the first place. I wouldn't take the queen back first, but in this scenario, if the rook is here, he would just have to move away, and then you take back. So you get a centralized pawn gone, you're up a pawn, and you traded queens, which is fine. So always look out for that knight move. If you do want to play like he did, that's fine. You are blocking this, but you are potentially bringing open, I guess, a fork here, like this square you can kind of keep in mind. But no, there's a lot of things that can happen along the way, but I just want to bring about why he did the rook e8 move and why it was not a bad move. different variation, but it does also kind of make weaknesses here too. So I castle queenside. He goes bishop d7, which is again a normal move. Now h4. H4, my whole goal is to really start attacking, pushing g4, pushing h4, and just getting everything in on this side. His immediate block with h5 is normal. And then I bring my bishop in here. So the reason for this is, again, I want to bring my knight in here to start attacking his knight. Kind of trade off this knight, this bishop, and this knight. Maybe even double up these pawns. Give myself a superior pawn structure because I do have these pieces on file. So my main point that I want to consider is this pawn. It's kind of stuck protecting this pawn. Because the bishop moved out of the way, this is the only defender of the d6 pawn. And I've got my rook and my queen on file with it. So as long as I can clear things out of the way, you know, eventually I could potentially take this knight here, and then I open up the file. So if I can start to trade these pieces away and double up pawns, well, then I've removed the defender of the d6 pawn. And I've got everything in the center anyway, so that's my plan, kind of what I'm thinking. I believe he brings his knight out over here, so again, I just slide back. Fine, just defending these pawns. Now the queen comes out, and here's where I should have probably moved here first, I would say. Maybe queen to b1. But for whatever reason, I don't know, time, who knows, I just moved here right away. My whole goal was to trade these pieces here. The problem, though, with this is when he takes my queen, which he does, I don't have an intermediary move. Of course, yes, this is weak, which is what I was kind of looking towards. And as well as this, I'm kind of attacking both, but I can't take him with check because he took my queen with check. So I have to take back. I take back with rook. So now I'm thinking like, okay, so I did that a little bit out of order, but I've got a centralized knight, two of them actually, cannot be pushed away by pawns, which is nice. And then I can bring my other rook over here, and again, the main goal is to get onto that d6 pawn. So he takes back my knight here. I take back with bishop. I don't really want to take with pawn because I kind of like this pawn structure that I have here. His bishop comes in. I don't want to trade, so I back away. And the reason is this bishop here, I don't know if that's a great spot for it. You know, with tempo, I mean, his whole goal was if I take, you know, he gets this nice little pawn island. Where I have 2 pawn islands with less pieces, he would have 6 pawns in 1 pawn island and then 1 in his other one. So that would be better for him, so I didn't want to do that. And when I move this back, I mean, this bishop, he's not going anywhere on this diagonal, so I'm not worried about that at all. So in fact, it's not even a good spot for him. I can potentially take him, maybe even push here to boot the knight first and then take there. I'm not sure. So his rook on A goes to c8. Again, this bishop, or this rook really has to hold on to the e7 square. And if he starts to push it, well, then I just move my pieces. Again, I just take there, and then I've got this piece, this pawn hanging. So I move my king just to get off the file with the rook. He brings his bishop back, so kind of a wasted move. My bishop moved a couple times, but his bishop did as well, so it kind of evens out there. Bring my other rook in, knowing that he could potentially come here with his knight and tempo on my rook, which he does at this point. And I have to make a decision, where do I want to go? Because I really don't want to sacrifice this bishop because it's on a good diagonal still with the king, and it's also superior. I mean, we're kind of getting near the endgame, so if I can hold on to both my bishops, I'll probably be better off. So you always kind of want to have the bishop pair, as they call it, when you have both bishops. So if I can trade this knight for one of his bishops, I would have the bishop pair, having both of my bishops. Which is just good, especially in this game where there's a lot of pawns. Eventually they're going to start moving, so the knight's good right now, but once these clear off and we start trading, this is really nice to have protected by my bishop rather than the knight. So I'd rather hold on to that. So considering my pawn structure with these 3 pawns, I really want to keep him, so I'm not going to trade him. So I decided to move the rook, which is kind of comes down to where. I mean, I can go here. Let's clear that. Here I'm not really doing anything. And I think if I did go over here, he could maybe eventually come in here with this square, eyeing this pawn potentially. So I don't really like that. I do just go straight up. Again, my whole point, staying on this file, if I can trade these pieces, this bishop's kind of loose too, so if I can move that pawn somehow, maybe pushing this pawn or something. So yeah, he could, you know, go back and forth if he'd like to, but his knight's fine. It's in a fine square. He plays a6. Not 100% sure why. I mean, he really could have pushed b5 right away. He didn't have to prepare for that. He does have the bishop supporting it. But he plays a6. My next move, I bring the bishop back. So the reason for that, The bishop here, if I didn't do my moves out of order, would have been fine with tempo on that knight. But now that that knight's gone, I am eyeing that square. But again, this piece can't move because then I'll move this knight somewhere and I've got these pieces attacking, both my rooks attacking the pawn. So that's the goal there. Bringing the bishop back here allows me to move this piece because the knight, if he were to move right now, let's say somewhere, I mean, he's got, you know, just coming in here. Maybe he'd probably take with the knight first. But that's just a pawn in front of my king. I don't really want to give that up. So I do kind of just commit to bringing my bishop back. He wasn't doing anything up there anyway, so I'm okay with that. Now he plays b5, which again he could have played before. I wasn't going to take this knight anyway, so I'm still not going to take at this point. Now I can move my knight, as I said. But just considering something real quick, looking at the pawn structure, try to think of like a good spot for this knight. He's really not doing anything in this square, so I kind of gave away the first move, but where does he want to go? Just take a second to think about what the best spot for him really is. Think about what I talked about already. So I'll share, you know, if you paused it, I'm not sure if you were thinking. So here's what I would do. I really want to get to this square. And for a knight, anytime he wants to move one square in any direction, it takes 3 moves. So the knight really can't just move there like he wants to. He actually would have to go 3 ways. So let's say he goes here, which is the first move, here, and then here. So then he would be in this square. So why this square? Again, I'm trying to put more pressure on this pawn, as well as, you know, potentially bringing my knight here with this attacking the rook and bishop. Again, if I can trade this rook knight for this bishop, I'm better off in the endgame. So I want to get there. So I start my journey. I go to e2 first. Now he pushes his pawn, which kind of was weird for a moment because this knight can't move at all. So I don't really have any easy ways to attack it at this point, but just weird kind of intermediary move there. So I continue with my plan, knight to f4, and then he takes my pawn. I have to pause a second here because my rook's under attack, so I take back with the f pawn, but this allows his bishop to come in here. And kind of, not at this point, but when he comes in here, it's tempo on my rook, and it kind of disrupts my attack there. So I do achieve the square that I wanted to go to, and his king goes in the mediary, went to h7, and then he comes in here, bishop to g4. I have to move my rook, so I just bring it right behind this pawn. If he starts to try to push this pawn, let's see the best way I could go. If he did move it right here, I could probably just go... could either go back to e3 or to maybe f4. The point is, once this knight moves, I'm attacking this piece, and all I really have to do is take that bishop, and I've got a tempo there. And I could even take it at right now, because if he takes it, he just goes down a pawn. So if he takes back here, oh no, I can't do that. Never mind. I was thinking tempo on the rook, but my rook's under attack. Never mind. Bad idea. So if he did go here again, I'd probably want to maybe try to get rid of this bishop, and if he trades, I'm okay with that. I can just get my rooks behind or bring my bishop out. This knight's kind of a nuisance, and I want to remove it without trading my bishop. So if we go back to the game, his blunder here, he moved to f8, and up until this point, I didn't think he was a bad player at all. I still don't think he's a bad player, but I didn't think he was low rated. I didn't check his rating beforehand. But he kind of shows his cards here. He just drops the pawn, and I'm not really sure why. Because at this point, now there's no defender at all for this pawn, kind of as if he had pushed it, which is why I went into the whole theory of pushing the e-pawn first, because now it's just gone. So kind of take what you were planning before and kind of apply it to the game now. He brings his rook over to defend this, because if I could take that bishop on my next move, I would, and I'd get that pawn, and now I'm up 2 pawns, which would be nice. In addition, this pawn would take back the knight, and he'd have 2 separate pawn islands over here. Pretty easy to attack. So I just attack his tempo on his rook, and now I take the knight. Because if he takes back with the pawn, I get that centralized pawn like I wanted to. Just a nice, you know, this pawn is now passed. It's only 4 moves away from promotion. So instead, he can't take with that. He takes back here, which allows me to get my bishop centralized. And defending this pawn too. So the tempo on the rook, he has to move yet again. I think his last 4 moves were with that rook. Well, last 3. So I bring my bishop out. It doesn't have to be pinned to this pawn anymore. He goes here, which is nice. He's eyeing this, kind of limiting my rook. My rook would have to slide over. And keep in mind, my king can be back ranked if I move this piece off the back rank. Now I do have this as protection, but if my bishop wants to be free to maybe attack this rook, I'm thinking that there could be a threat. This rook would just drop down here, potential checkmate. So keep that in mind through this whole thing. It was kind of tough. There's no time for me really to move a piece easily, you know, to get out of checkmate threats. And it's a lot going on. So I wanted to make sure I'm also not dropping pieces. My pawns are under attack as well. So first, I do decide to go after here because there is a weakness. I want to exploit it as quick as I can while it's still there. But you know, it's kind of weird having your rook in front of the pawns. But in this situation, I love the way these bishops are. Like, these bishops are so strong that he can't put a rook on here to defend it. The only way to block it is to bring his bishop back here, which allows me to put some pressure on the king side. So I like that that's going there for me. He ends up going with bishop to g3 again. My rook, well, he can't come up here anyway because now both of his bishops are working together. Bishops are kind of like a diagonal rook if you think about it, covering both of these different colored squares, but in a diagonal fashion. So really only move, I mean, I can go here, here, or h1. h1's the best move because I'm defending this pawn. I don't want to give that away, and then all of a sudden he's got these two pawns kind of marching their way down. So don't want that to happen. Now here's where he makes the blunder. He goes to c8 with his bishop, which he should have done a move before. When he does that, again, that's the only way to block, defend the a6 pawn. But what he missed was the next tactic. Take a sec to see it if you do, but it was bishop to b6 with a discover attack on the bishop and attacking the rook. Now, if this bishop weren't so strong, the best move would be to come here. So, like, I can't take this bishop because of a threat of checkmate. However, that would be checkmate, but because of this move, or because this bishop is blocking this square, that's the only really way he could have saved his bishop. So strong centralized bishop a couple moves ago was a really nice spot for it. So he moves and I take the bishop. Not really much else to do there. Now we just start trading a couple pieces. Again, I have to be very careful because, like I said, my bishop is now not blocking the back rank. I only have my rook here. So at this point, I mean, his goal was really to get rid of that bishop, I think, and then double up his rooks. But I'm really only one move away. I just have to bring a pawn up. And I'm a bishop right now. So I go back here because my bishop was under attack. And I like that this can come here to block mate as well. Plus, it's a better spot than where else could I have gone? I guess back here, maybe. I don't know. It doesn't look as good to me. I kind of like here because I'm blocking the advancement of these pawns. They're both on light squares and my bishop's dark square, so both of them have to go to a dark square if they want to move forward, so I like that I'm blocking that. So he attacks this pawn. I defend the pawn. Now he double attacks it. Now again, I kind of want to be careful because I could, let's see, yeah, I don't do that move. But if I do come here, I guess that does defend it, but then he could potentially put another attacker on it. It's just risky. I mean, this pawn is now undefended, so he might get the pawn back. But I'm up a bishop, so I can just bring my other piece into it at some point. Just kind of need to be considerate of that. But I go here to attack with the tempo on the d pawn, and again, blocking him from pushing this pawn because he would drop a rook. So he forces this trade here, and I take back this pawn. Again, I still want to defend this from the rook, and I still have to defend my back rank. So it's been quite a few moves, and I haven't solidified my defense for my king, so it's time to do that. So he brings his rook here. Now it kind of comes about endgame tactics, which pawn to push. I think it's best to push the g pawn. G3 first to defend, to save this. But I think it's best, I meant the b pawn, which I do next. There it is. Because if you want to think about it, like, this doesn't really help because my king can't come out, not with this rook here. And you kind of want to have this be a barrier, especially since his rook is on the second row. You want to be able to go this way on the left side and have this blocking any potential ways that your king is blocked off from the action. And then same thing like here, yeah, you know, my king is protected and he's moving out, but I'm losing this pawn if I move my king away. And at the same point, you do want to centralize your king in the endgame. So g3 allows me the best, or sorry, b3 allows me the best chance to do that. So he starts trading. Guess he's just out of ideas at this point. Check, these pieces are not going anywhere. Here's another mistake because now I have check on h4. king has to move away, and I go up that pawn. Now I've got a pass pawn. We'll go a little bit quicker through these last few moves. It really becomes about getting my rook in front of my pawn, saving my bishop so I can move the pawn, continuing to keep him there, and then just promoting my pawn until he's forced to trade. Because once he trades his only major piece left, it's just about bringing my king up. This whole side was just a distraction. Trading everything. My king's already on the left side, on the queen side of the board. So all I really have to do is come up and get both of these pawns. Nothing he can do, and we get both. I'll go to the end, but it's really not. Yeah, pretty standard. Yeah, I think I stopped taking notation. I did end up checkmating him in this game. But yeah, so the Yugoslav attack, very strong. This was a bit different than any other Yugoslav game I've played, so I really wanted to share it with you guys, but this was a win for me as white. So I hope you guys have enjoyed all the Yugoslav attack as well as dragon variations, because they've been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot of them just by doing these videos, and also just because I see them all the time, so it's kind of natural to me to see now. So yeah, let me know what you guys think of this video. I will be talking about my games for the King's Indian over the next two games that I played in the tournament. 2 out of 3 people who played white against me played d4. It's just a very popular opening, more so than e4. So yeah, if you're interested about seeing what that opening's all about, I'm pretty well versed in it now. I've been playing it for a while, and I'll go over those in the next 2 videos. So I will see you guys there. If you haven't already, click that subscribe button and check out ragchess.com, where I have more in-depth articles that I'm continuously adding to over time. So I will see you guys next week.